Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having the patience and waiting for us to commence. I thank you. I am Fortuna Anthony, a member of the Mind Bloom Consultancy and St. Xavier Consultancy firm. This evening, I will be sitting in for my colleagues who are located in Canada. They will introduce themselves, or I may have to introduce them. But I want to warmly welcome you here this evening and to say to you that we are delighted to have persons sitting face to face as well as those who are online. We are here this evening to speak about the Enhanced Education Act. But let me first recognize our Deputy Permanent Secretary, Mr. Kendall Kodra. I want to also welcome Archbishop Malzes, who is here with us this evening, and you, the special invited individuals who have turned up this evening to share with us the journey that we have traveled. As we look at the national validation session, this is what it is all about. And I want to introduce my two colleagues who I said are in different parts of Canada, and this is what technology allows us to do. We have the principal of Mind Bloom Consultancy firm, Mrs. Paula McKinnon, who is here online, and we have Professor Monica Williams, who is also a member of the team. Both of them are online this evening to provide any support that I may require, because we worked very closely as a team. The draft person for the Enhanced Education Act is not here with us this evening, but this is Mrs. Kim St. Rose. So we have gone through an entire process, and I want to thank all of you for attending in person and online. I know we are starting almost 30 minutes late, so I will stop here and we will continue with the program.
There is
we
a challenge with the
have
audio.
with
You are hearing it
us
clearly.
Mrs. Joelle Schalmine. She is the District Education Officer, District 8, so she's in Soufrière, but she will lead us in devotion. So could we kindly stand? Can you hear her? We're ready for Mrs. Schalmine.
My name is Joel Shalmine, Education Officer for District 8. Let me join Mrs. Anthony in welcoming all of you who have joined this very important session. Now, I notice that all of you have stood, but I would like to say something very briefly on the Education Act before we delve into prayer. I consider today very historic and a blessing for us educators to be in the vanguard of great change to education in Saint Lucia. We lament the archaic, regressive, substandard education system in Saint Lucia, particularly when we compare it with what is out there internationally in the first world countries that we struggle to keep up or perhaps align with. And for years, we have been constantly clamoring for change, for an education sector which is more 21st century compliant. Well, change is finally here. The doors to our future and the progression of education in Saint Lucia is closed to archaism. Today, we witness a slew of initiatives, reform, all rolled out at once to revolutionize, remodel, repackage, and rebrand education, though we seem overwhelmed by it all. But we have to admit that it is a change that promises progression in education for Saint Lucia. Change which ensures that today and tomorrow's children can thrive, adapt in a world undergoing waves of changes itself in how we live, function, and socialize. The Revised Education Act is one of these great reform plans for Saint Lucia. And the many consultative sessions, additions, deletions, revisions, regroup, redraft, present again means that we want to get this right and of excellent standards. Your voice matters, Saint Lucia, because it affects all of us. We are the implementers of this great change, educators, parents, students, and all other stakeholders. So let us embrace these changes and improvements that are coming, investing our hope in producing the cadre of students who will restore our country to prosperity. In Titus chapter 2, verse 7 to 8, it says, "You have instructed us in everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us." So as educators, we need to be a model example demonstrating purpose in our teaching. We need to model good character and provide quality education that is beyond reproach. A new, revised, repolished Education Act will help us live by these standards. So at this juncture, we want to give reverence to God who has made all things possible for us. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Simply interpreted, knowledge and education begin with reverence for God. So shall we all compose ourselves in whatever space that you occupy in a correct posture for prayer? Ever loving, ever faithful, ever merciful God, we approach your throne room of grace, thanking you for the many blessings you have bestowed upon us, for the success of the day, for employment, intelligence, creativity, a sound mind to do the work you have called us to. We say thank you. Father, we present this session into your hands and ask that you take control. Let everything which will be presented and discussed on the Revised Education Act be done in accordance with your will for our fair Helen, Saint Lucia. We ask for a double portion of blessings on our consultants, that you give them the patience, foresight to develop the best Education Act which will respond to our needs and uplift the standards of education in Saint Lucia. We pray for unity and cooperation amongst us, that together we will mightifully and powerfully move the education sector to higher heights and greater depths. Father, we pray for a purging of all that which is impure and debilitating our education sector. We ask you to release our students, our teachers from the shackles of failure and despair, and to guide us into directions of hope, triumph, and celebration. Let this session be productive and effective today. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock, fortress, high tower, and redeemer. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you ever so much, Mrs. Joel Charlemagne. Could you kindly sit? Welcome to our Deputy Chief Education Officer, Mr. Cyrus Sepal. Mr. Sepal, you can come sit up here. No, this isn't moving. They said just click. Move. Okay, while we are sorting out what is it, you all didn't say it was over. Good, thank you. You have to put it on over there. Good. We are now looking at what our program looks like for this evening. We have covered devotion, so I now welcome to the podium our Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Kendall Kodra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to say a pleasant good evening to all, both persons who are here physically and also in the virtual setting. Let me take the opportunity to join Mrs. Anthony and, of course, Mrs. Charlemagne in welcoming you to this validation exercise of the Education Act. This process has indeed been a journey. Many of you would have been engaged from the onset with the various iterations month after month. But now I believe we are in a very good space. The Mindbloom team led by Ms. Paula McKinnon and coordinated through the equipped team have done a remarkable job thus far regarding the review and the revision process of the existing Education Act 2005. I must say that there has been substantial consultation and input from a variety of stakeholders and various groups. To date, we can attest that nearly 1,000 submissions have been received from Saint Lucians to inform this change. Some of the core points noted as follows. There is need to have an Education Act that reflects the aspirations that citizens have for education in Saint Lucia. There is an urgent need to update the Education Act to make it more inclusive. Inclusivity considers also age, making greater provision for learners at the early childhood education level, and abilities, providing equitable access for students, irrespective of their learning, physical, special, or other circumstances. There is also need to have regulations to assist educators with the implementation of the Act. This is one area that we have been clamoring for. The Ministry of Education thanks the public for your active participation in this process. We have listened attentively and, where necessary, actioned via further amendments to the draft bill. The provision in these provisions in this further updated iteration of the bill should enable the following: And we spoke about one, the expanded age range for education, expanded support for learners with special needs, an assets-based approach to education, which builds on students' strengths rather than identifying and treating deficits. A more holistic approach to education for every child, with the recognition of the importance of psychosocial services provided by our guidance counselors. And I'm happy that our head of counseling is here, Mrs. Eugene. Greater empowerment of principals and teachers to create safe and inclusive learning environments through the establishment of a national code of conduct. Enhance quality of education through the provisions for a national curriculum that includes early childhood education and expanded sections on homeschooling and school inspections. The Ministry of Education thanks you for your participation in this evening's validation session and looks forward to the successful completion of this process. We also look forward to the ratification of this revised act and its supporting regulations as we strive towards the enhanced governance of Saint Lucia's education sector. Effective governance of the education sector necessitates sound and progressive legislation. Thank you once again for your participation, and do have a pleasant evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kodra. A bit of housekeeping. At this point in time, we welcome constant feedback from persons present here this evening. Your feedback will be well received and will be acted on immediately, and we welcome that kind of feedback right here, and members of the public and those online until Friday of this week. So we continue looking at where we are at and how this journey has moved on. This journey has been a very long one. And give me a moment. I think this is going ahead of me. As you will see here, the journey has been a very, very long one. 2 years. We have been working through various stakeholders. The journey began in February of 2022. It commenced with the team meeting and tasks being assigned to various persons, with research being done locally, regionally, and internationally. We looked at consultations with key stakeholders, and at the very beginning, after we had done meetings upon meetings, we had 35 consultations to ascertain what is important to St. Lucians and the education system. We looked at meeting with key stakeholders, and we consulted the Teachers' Union. We consulted the Principal Association. We consulted secondary school principals. We consulted private school principals and teachers. We spoke with the Christian Council, the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, Health, the Ministry of Labor and Gender Affairs, and we also had a virtual town hall meeting where everyone was invited to come and to share what their aspirations for education in St. Lucia should be like. There was a proposed structure for the act that attempted to reflect the aspirations expressed during the consultation. Every consultation was recorded with permission so that we did not misquote anybody. So we went through and the aspirations were being analyzed, put together. And then the first draft of the act. Those of you who can recall, the present act that we are enhancing was developed in 2005. Am I correct, Mr. Kodra? 2005. So it was time for us to look at making things change, as Mrs. Shalmain said. We circulated the first draft and conducted further consultation, and more than 700 comments and suggestions were received. Among the comments received were those from the Saint Lucia Teachers Union, because we know that the Teachers Union is the voice of educators in Saint Lucia. We spoke with the Attorney General's chambers, the National Accreditation Council, the Teaching Service Commission, the opposition party, the National Principals Association, and the OECS, as you would recognize, has a lot to do with education in the region. Then we went on and we prepared the second draft of the education bill. It's not an act. Let me pause a moment and welcome our Chief Education Officer, Ms. Diodone. Welcome, nice to have you, ma'am. And then we circulated the second draft and we conducted, we all in the time of the consultations, we have opened the website and the Office of Equip under the management, very efficient management of Ms. Emmanuel. We were receiving comments from members of the public, whether they were overseas or not. When this was circulated, we had a town hall meeting again, one in each of the districts, from District 1 to District 8. We then had 2 more sessions with teachers, a session with principals again, and a session with private sector and NGOs. A further 232 unique comments, suggestions were received because, as I mentioned earlier, every time we receive comments, we would filter, we would marry them, and we would see what would be the common areas that persons wanted us to address. The input was also received from the Saint Lucia Teachers Union. The National Accreditation Council requested a special meeting, and that was held with them. The Catholic Board of Management and the consultants engaged to develop a special education needs policy for Saint Lucia. As you are aware, simultaneously with this enhancement of the Education Act, there were other consultancies taking place in Saint Lucia, and one of them was a policy development for special education. And knowing that we were also working on regulations, we engaged the consultants for special education. We then prepared the third draft, which is now being validated this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we want you to ask questions. If you need to raise your hand, those who are present, yes. Go ahead, sir. The mic is at your back.
Yes, 1, 2. Good evening, 1, 2. Yes, good evening, everyone. Aaron Alexander here, President of the Inola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari. And I would like to ask, I didn't hear you mention it at all, I don't think there was any engagement with the Okay. 1, 2. Okay, that's much better. Thank you. And so, as I was saying, I was just asking the question because I don't think anything ever came to the community, the Rastafari community, to engage us in the as part of the stakeholders consultation. So, if that was not done, I'm requesting that a consultation be held with the Rastafari community on the whole Education Act. Thank you.
Let me just briefly say that we are not consulting this afternoon. We are making notes. When we put out the invitation to the public, I know we had members, parents who belong to the Rastafari community. We did not send an invitation, but we are hoping that everybody who had a child and belonged to a particular faith would have availed themselves to come in and making comments. And we did deal specifically, I can recall, with 1 or 2 parents who were Rastafaris who raised issues about schooling. We had one of the issues was homeschooling, and that we have given special attention in the enhanced bill. So at this point in time, we cannot consult, or else we'll never finish consulting. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, hi, good evening.
Good evening.
As a parent, I can only say that it concerns me very much in the world that I live in right now, because 40-something years ago it wasn't so. And you all spoke about a changing world, and I can see it is definitely a changing world. For me as a parent, my fear is a lot of these first world country education systems coming down to our small, tiny little islands with our traditions and customs. And we've seen a lot of the types of teaching, the comprehensive sexual education. And I think in your I think the Education Act speaks about it in terms of social or emotional learning. And when I did the research, I could not help but stumble on information that speaks towards LGBT and gender. Now, I read the act, and I didn't see much in its explicit terms, but through this whole social emotional learning thing, when I did the research, because I didn't understand what it was, it pointed me towards this. And we fear, parents, that our children are being indoctrinated by a grander agenda proposed by world bodies that, you know, a bunch of unelected people that we don't know, unaccountable to us. And we as parents, in our small islands, we've seen a lot of rejection in other Caribbean islands when it comes to this whole comprehensive sexual education. I think not too long ago there was a book that we bought from MNC that exposed the whole agenda when it actually teaches your children to question their own gender, making them think that they're in the wrong body. So we hope that things like that are not going to be part of the changes that's going to come for our children, because some of us are still traditional. Maybe you might call it backwards, I don't know. But we want to keep to that tradition. And again, like I said, we've seen what's taking place in the wider world, and we're reading, and we are very much concerned. Even the part where it speaks about a child getting suspended, or I think it was expelled or something like that for not taking a vaccine. All of these things we need to, as parents, some of us don't subscribe to these medications. So again, we are concerned and we want probably more dialogue because we are stakeholders too, and so are our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We heard a lot of this kind of talk as we consulted with parents, and I can assure you that the present bill that we are presenting is culturally, spiritually sound for this country, Saint Lucia. We have not shared books or ideas. You are very right. We are not the government. I need you to remember that. What comes into the country in bookshops, I do not think that even the Ministry of Education has control over. But we did have this kind of conversation, and we have not gone that route. So I think we will not be consulting again because, as I keep on saying, if we do not know where to draw the line, we will never stop. It is up to us as individuals, educators, and parents, and a government to know where we draw the line for our country and our people. So don't go buying books you do not want to expose your child to. Have a conversation with your child with regards to the good character building, integrity, etc., etc. Help your child develop the kind of mindset and attitude that he or she knows good from bad and indifferent. The first home, the home is the first place for teaching. So our children will reflect our values, what they see us model at home. And this Education Act has to be in line with the Constitution of our country. This is the one place it comes after. It is not before the Constitution. And I don't think our Constitution is speaking of issues. So if you don't mind, sir, I can simply say, have no fears, okay? Have no fears, just let us see how we can produce an Education Act which is culturally sound. And what was it that the people that we consulted wanted? What is it that they had as the aspiration for education in Saint Lucia? Because that's what we wanted to know. What is it that you see education? And we heard we wanted it to be, people wanted it to be student-centered. The child is the learner. Promote a diverse culture, language, and the history of Saint Lucia. We wanted it to honor Saint Lucia's commitment to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including the provision of universal access to education. We also are signatories to Quality Education for All and schools which are safe and more secure. These are what we were told are the aspirations for persons for education. Okay, so we go on to the next enhancement. And, sorry, yes, somebody has their hand up? Why is it doing? Yes, please.
Whilst you have mentioned that everything was said in, you know, by, it's, what I'm trying to say is that it's written in the Education Act that children will be mandated to take vaccines, and what is special education, it's not defined, and that is a very wide and broad description, which could entail later on down the road LGBTQ and all the rest of it. First of all, as a grandmother, I don't have very young children, but I have children who may have young children in the future, and I certainly do not want my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, if possible, to be learning about sex education at primary school or even preschool for that matter, because this is what is being pushed. I don't know if anybody here knows it, but it's happening. And Saint Lucia, yes, we need to move ahead, but not all change is good change. And as a parent, and as I'm like a lioness when it comes to my children, I do not want anything that may jeopardize or harm my children, my family, and I care about all children in Saint Lucia and in the world for that matter, because the children have parents who are not educating themselves, and the governments are implementing mandates and things where you take vaccines. I saw a little thing where when I was a baby, my mother brought me for vaccinations. Thank God I'm not autistic or anything else. But now there's a register, it's medical stuff. There's a register of vaccinations that they're now trying to put into young babies. And it is unbelievable. Now, when is that? Is that going to come to St. Lucia? Are our children going to be sent home because they're not taking it? They're not taking the vaccine. So we need to have that in some sort of reassurance, don't we? As parents, as grandparents, as citizens.
Let me say for a moment that we need to stop and consider that an education bill or an act will not contain everything. If you have taken time to look at this enhanced bill, you will see that there is a definition. We totally looked at and increased, depending on the requests from our stakeholders. Special education is defined right there in the act. Okay? Now, on the matter of vaccines and this sort of thing, we are not mandating vaccines. This cannot go into the Education Act. We are looking at, and we haven't reached that slide, but I will say, we have, for the first time, regulations to accompany the act. An act, or when it becomes a bill, cannot be changed every 2 minutes or every year. However, depending on situations, depending on changes, the regulations here can easily be changed. And this is what I want you to remember.
Excuse me, ma'am, that is a problem, because if we have another pandemic, right, then the regulation will be changed and we will be forced to take these vaccinations that were very harmful. I have friends and family. I've seen the suffering. People are not walking. All sorts of things, side effects, and I'm very serious. We need some sort of reassurance that these things will not be forced and foisted on us. First of all, health is separate to education. Education and health, as far as I see, health is a personal matter. And I don't see why a school should say that, well, they have to produce a card. Yes, it has been produced in the past.
We will not go into this kind of discussion this afternoon. I don't think this is where we want to make decisions like that.
But it is a concern of
yes,
of
we are
a lot of
noting your
people.
concern. We are noting the concern. So let's not debate that concern. There's everything being said here this afternoon is being recorded, and we will take it to the next level. And I'm sure as we work to produce the final draft, wherever we have consulted and we have heard, we work to suit. So let's not debate this right now. Yes, sir.
Afternoon, Dr. Isidore here, Charles Isidore. Yes, it's not a point of debate at this point in time, but it's of concern to me as a parent.
Excuse me, Ms. Anthony.
Yes.
I think Dr. Williams wanted to respond to that.
Okay.
Question.
Okay, hold on. We have Mrs. McKinnon. Yes, Professor Williams, you wanted to respond. Go ahead. Paula, I cannot hear Monica. Go ahead, sir. She probably is having some.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Are you ready, Monica?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Louder.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Louder, thank you.
I've been trying to join the conversation, but been unable to unmute. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I also want to say a huge thank you to the people who are going to the microphone. The parent who spoke earlier about concerns with regard to gender identity and expressed the comment that perhaps conservative viewpoints were not appreciated. They are very much respected. You are a parent, and the parents and the students are the most important people in the system. So thank you, and to the other lady who spoke, to the gentleman who spoke about the Rastafarians. We want to hear from you, and we appreciate it. So I just want to address some of the points that were raised. First of all, with regard to the concern around sex education or sex education books, the point was made that we are not the government, and in the Act it clearly states that the Minister of Education has control, and I know we have an echo and I don't know why. Is that any better? Is that better? Okay. The Minister of Education chooses the textbooks and learning resources, and the Minister of Education also has authority over programming. So by all means, this is your Education Act. It's for St. Lucians, and that's why we spend so much time consulting with everyone and listening to feedback and making edits based on what you asked us. So that's one area. Another area that was raised is around the vaccinations, and here we get into a tricky point. The lady who spoke and said that education is separate from health, that is true, but there are laws between different parts of government that we have to respect, and in particular, the Education Act has to comply with the Constitution of Saint Lucia. And the legal advice that we had from Mrs. St. Rose is that the requirement for vaccination is connected to the Constitution, and the Education Act has to comply with the Constitution. So we certainly heard concerns about this. We looked into it, and that was the legal advice that we were given. So please keep making any comments or raising any questions. We want to hear from you. We're happy to address them. And we're speaking about this third draft of the Act, and we only got here based on what St. Lucians told us. So thank you so much for your participation tonight.
Thank you very much. Monica, go ahead, sir.
Yes, as a concerned parent, in reading this bill, there are a few concerns. And in particular, when it says mode of admission, and it says submit to immunization record to register under medical practitioner. One of the things I'm concerned about is that you keep mentioning medical practitioner as opposed to healthcare practitioner. A medical practitioner is not the only one who would see a child in terms of their health. So I move to have you strike that word medical and put healthcare practitioner, because the new age now is that even medical doctors are no longer practicing medicine as used to. You know, a lot have gone alternative medicine, And also they have combined medicine with alternative medicine. So with you saying medical doctor, you sort of pigeonhole everybody into that one structure where, you know, they have no option but to go and see the medical doctor. And unfortunately, the last 3 years have shown the failure of the medical system, where we all falter for a COVID pandemic. And we are now suffering the consequences of that. So effort must be made to restructure these requirements. Yes, if a parent needs to be immunized, yes, that's okay. But the option must be given. It must be a personal decision and not a medical doctor's decision. And you mentioned about the Constitution. Yes, the Children Act does have a right to non-forced medical procedure. The Human Rights Act does have that in there also. The Nuremberg Act does have that in there also. So we come in to mandate a vaccine on someone to enter into a school is taking a step further and beyond expectation. Even worse, when you mention here on the suspension, the refusal of a student to be medically examined, immunized, and treated under the Act of Medical Practitioner registered under Healthcare Act. You know, it's a bit frightening. We see that in societies where, you know, the president dictates, and what the president says goes. It is not under democratic rule. And with this document being presented here, is saying that we have no choice. And for the Rastafarian and others who opt to not to vaccinate, that choice must be there. And we are still living in Saint Lucia. And we cannot overlook that principle that we have a constitutional right to autonomy of our body. And as parents, I have the final say in the way my child is brought up. Yes, the education system is there to assist. And we have to work together in order to provide the best education for that child. So putting a mandate in terms of vaccine to enter into the institution is a violation of the child's right, violation of my right, and violation of the Constitution. So in no way possible you should have that in there, trying to say, well, you know, it's based on the laws of the state. The laws of the state would not mandate vaccination to anyone. In fact, the Prime Minister, before he was elected, said he would never mandate vaccine. So how come all of a sudden it's okay to mandate vaccines? And unfortunately, those who mandated vaccine, they have no idea about the vaccine. They never took time out to understand the ingredients in the vaccine, what's going on. And in closing, unfortunately, the new vaccines coming out are not the vaccines of old. A lot of them have quantum dot, self-assembly hydrogel, etc., nanovolts, which is similar to that of the COVID vaccine. So basically what they're saying is that since you did not want to take the COVID vaccine, we're going to give it to your kids. And we cannot allow that.
Thank you. Thank you. We have noted, and we will go back to our legal brains. Yes, Archbishop Malzer.
Yes, I'm Archbishop Gabriel Malzer, and I'm speaking in the name of the Catholic Church. So I want first of all to thank, the expertise for engaging in this process, this timely process. However, I must express some dissatisfaction in the inclusion of an institution that has 33 schools as a basic stakeholder in the process of consultation. To the point that at the beginning, we almost had to find ourselves having to force ourselves into the conversation. And I don't think that was very, very good. And to the point that a little more time was given to us, and I appreciate that. It was given to us to meet our groups and discuss the issues. Now, in addition to this, after our consultation, our discussions, we produced a 16-page document commenting on opinions about the act or the draft. And as I read the final document today, or the last document, the last draft, I see no relationship between what we said in our 16-page document in relation to the act. And we've been told that the consultation process is ended and we are at the point of validation. But I am questioning whether anything that we have stated as a Catholic community in terms of our views on education, whether it would be considered in the draft of or the final document of the act.
That is why I said earlier, any comments, any changes, any suggestions, please send it in to Ms. Emmanuel in the equip division, and definitely it will get to us. I am sure once we get it and we consult our various legal minds, we will move on with what is required. So we move on. Yes. Since January. Okay, so I am sure we will note.
Excuse me, Mrs. Anthony.
Yes, go ahead, Paula.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to thank both speakers for their comments. I just wanted to respond to the question about immunization. The intention with the wording in the Act is to have immunization records presented, not so much to exclude people from attending, but to know what immunizations children have had. The intention with the Act is that should children have not have immunization, the Chief Education Officer would then consult with the Ministry of Health to determine whether or not there is any danger to other children as a result of someone not having an immunization. So the intention is to ensure that the entire school community is protected against potential virus or whatever. So the intention is not exclusion at all, but to know, and to know that the entire student population is safe. So again, this is a case where the health regulations work with the regulations in education together to hopefully have the best outcome for everyone.
Thank you, Paula.
And I believe that Dr. Williams is also raised her hand.
Go ahead, sir. Dr. Williams will, okay, after. Dr. Williams will come on after Betty.
Go ahead.
No, the gentleman. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising, just as I said, that whoever did this document with respect to vaccine have no knowledge of vaccine and healthcare as a whole. And they're just going based on what's been told. You know, an immunized child, if you believe in the vaccination, should have no fear of an unimmune child, unvaccinated child. Okay? And also, it should be such that if there's an outbreak of any condition at the school, efforts must be made to mitigate that situation. You'll have the child stay at home, have the specialty, approach a child and try to understand what's happening with that child. But to put a blanket where this is the whole that you have to go through to an education is disrespectful and a slap in the face to those who believe in natural health.
We hear you, sir. Thank you. Yes, Betty.
This is specific to sections in the Act, and so I guess it's been recorded, and so it will be picked up. First of all, with regard to the purpose, and I'm glad that's where we are. By the way, I'm Betty Comby, and my area is quality management. And with quality management, there's a framework. And so if we are promoting quality education, then I would have loved to see that framework throughout the Act. And so from that basis, I am speaking. In the preliminary section of the Act, under purpose, it says, again, another thing, the reference document I have is the November 2023 document. I am assuming there's a more recent document?
Yes, there is a
okay.
more.
So it might be that this has already been taken in consideration because I did submit some comments to the committee through the Policy and Administration website of education. So based on what your Grace said, I'm not sure if it was incorporated. So first thing, under 3N, it read, an act is to implement a strategic plan. Is that term still there, strategic plan? And from my understanding, when it comes to legislation, it starts from a policy document. Because if you tell me a strategic plan, then I want to see that plan. So if strategic plan is used, I think that is an issue, and most legislation starts from a policy document. Also, under that same purpose, any quality system has to have a commitment to continuous improvement, any quality system. And if you're talking about a continuous improvement system, then there's an operating principle, and that's PDCA. That for anything you're doing, you must plan, you must do, you must check, and you must act to improve. I really think that needs to be put into that document, that everybody using that PDCA cycle. So we're on a journey of improvement. Item 2, I did not see who is responsible, and again, anything that has to get done, somebody has to be responsible. In the document I looked at, I could not identify who was responsible for the review and the improvement of the education system. I checked under the responsibility of the chief, the responsibility of the minister, right? Please check that out, that somebody has been identified to review and improve, responsible for the review and the improvement of the system. 3, I noticed the chief education officer was not on the education advisory board. Part 1, Division 2. I cannot understand that. At least as an official member, the education officer has a lot of information and should be on any board pertaining to education. Okay. Number 4, Part 5. Part 5 talked to 3 processes: curriculum, instruction, and assessment. If we're talking quality education, evaluation is key. Evaluation has to be included there. Evaluation is, are you achieving the objectives you have set? That is important. Again, if we just follow the operating principle of any quality management system, you need to plan, you need to do, you need to check, and you need to act to improve. Part 4, management of schools. Who on the board is strictly representing the students' interests? I watched the persons on the board, and I'm saying, but who there is representing? So you make me the sense, say, a student is too young to put on the board, but somebody has to be on the board that is bringing across the student perspective. A quality system which is focused on meeting the needs and expectations of the customer. The customer has to be involved. The student is another thing, somebody mentioned about the 2 important people in the education system. The 2 most important people in the education system are the students and the teachers, period. And the teachers, period. I will not talk for teachers. Teachers can talk for themselves. Yes. but I will talk to students. And so when we talk about social, psychosocial services, I have not checked, but teachers, make sure they have psychosocial services for you to enact. Very important. Moving on. I Googled remediation. Remediation is about correction. Remediation is about corrective action. I did not see remediation addressed in the Education Act. Again, if you're on a journey of improvement, then remediation is a key process when it comes to education. Right? And I think that was it on my part. Oh, another thing, stress, that as we go through the act, we are supposed to see, whatever we do, we are supposed to encourage synergy and integration. That is very important. And sometimes it's putting key people in the group that will allow that. But very important that as we go through this act, ensure that we are fostering synergy and integration. And that's it on my part.
Okay, then, thank you very much. I hope you have taken time to also look at how the regulations support the act. Everything, as I said earlier, cannot be put in the act, but we have regulations for the first time. So if we could move on, we are looking at promoting promotes inclusive student center.
Excuse me, Ms.
Monica wants to speak. Paula?
Yes, she does, and she is having difficulty unmuting her mic. If somebody could unmute her mic,
Could somebody
please.
unmute Professor William? Thank you.
And while we're waiting, Ms. Crombie, yes, we did receive your comments. It's nice to be able to put a face to the name. So thank you for these additional comments and for your initial comments. And Your Grace, we definitely consider the 16-page submission. As a matter of fact, we spent considerable time on it. So we have heard and we have received them, and Ms. Emmanuel has done an excellent job of sharing the comments that have been received with us for consideration.
Over to you, Monica. We can see you. Go ahead. Could you all unmute Monica for me, please?
She is still muted.
Good. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Great. I want to again thank everyone for their comments, and I want to go back to a couple of comments. Archbishop, we did, as Paula said, receive a 16-page submission, and we did make some changes in wording based on that, because in that 16-page submission, you raised some issues that other people have raised here tonight that we addressed, in particular about concerns about gender issues in schools, or gender identity being raised in schools. And we did change some wording. For example, in the education psychosocial supports, we changed wording from gender equity to equal opportunity initiatives. So we certainly did take that into account. To the lady who just spoke a moment ago, thank you so much, and we did look at your input. And I can't tell you how pleased I was to hear your comments, because they are so important, about continuous improvement, about evaluation, about the specific roles and responsibilities of administrators, and also about student representation. In the latest version of the Act, in answer to one of your questions, in section 3N, we do now reference continuous school and system improvement explicitly. So N reads, support the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the strategic plans of the government in the education system to facilitate continuous school and system improvement. And continuous improvement is referenced in other parts of the Act as well. In addition, there's another consultancy that's underway across the OECS where we are bringing continuous school and system improvement into the schools, and it's being piloted right now. And it's the 4-step model that you described of plan, do, study, act. So that is happening. With regard to student representation on the Education Advisory Board, in the latest version of the draft bill, section 13.3E, it stipulates that there will be student representation, a representative nominated by the National Students' Council or other representative of students. So you raised a whole series of important points there. Thank you very much. And we are noting everything and we'll look at the wording further.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Monica,
Mrs. Anthony.
thank you, everyone, because I think we had not, there were several advertisements and saying where you could get that latest version to download. And this evening, we were hoping that as you speak, you would have had the opportunity to peruse the latest version of the Act and the regulations. But you still have the opportunity until Friday. As we said earlier, if you have a few comments, you could send it in to equip. If you do not know how to access that, I am sure Ms. Emmanuel will share that with you before we end. Now, another section that we want to look at is what this new enhanced bill, it's not an act as yet, bill speaks of, where we spent and put in a lot of effort, promotes inclusive, student-centered, quality education for all students. All students. It includes all learners from age 3 to age 16. Provides for increased support for students with special educational needs. And if you look at the regulations and the act, you will see that a lot of time was spent on that. I think when I counted, there were 6 pages that spoke, because we recognize that we have issues and we must make things right for children with special educational needs. And when we speak of special educational needs, we did not just confine it to any disability, but we also took into consideration the gifted child. Describe additional psychosocial support for students and families. Establishes a new special needs education and inclusive education council. It is there. Establishes, an addition of early childhood education. Some schools you would have heard, there is the pre-K being piloted, or is taking place in some schools where there is space. As part of the national curriculum, we strengthen the provision for homeschooling and school inspection. The homeschooling, where parents may wish to keep their children at home and educate them, they would need to provide the chief education officer with the requisites to show that you are capable, you are able, and because some parents homeschool their children up to grade 5 or grade 6, and then they want to transition into the secondary school system. The education officers are meant to also visit the homes. In the homeschooling issues, a child who is being homeschooled can be taken to participate in a school sports, and this sort of thing. So homeschooling has been given priority and has been expanded. We also looked at the enhancement. Why is that always doing this to me? Went too far. Good. It empowers teachers and principals to create safe and secure learning environments. It contains the first national code of conduct. You will find it in the regulations and the code of conduct. This is the first time St. Lucia is going to have this to support this. Many of us did not know this is of no use without this to implement. So we have moved on that, and this has been done, and I'm going to encourage you, if you have not read it, take a little time to read it, please. So we also, it promotes positive behavior in safe, welcoming, and inclusive schools. It clearly articulates standards for behavior and appropriate dress. And that's appropriate dress for everyone entering the school compound. Positive behavior interventions and support. Well-defined categories of misbehavior and acceptable disciplinary responses. This does it. It provides school leaders with the ability to conduct searches and seize hazardous material to protect the school community. We have empowered the principals to do that. The other section describes the key roles in the provision of education. Those in government, assisted, and denominational schools. It speaks of those in the Ministry of Education, including the district education officers. We have spoken to the curriculum officers. The counselors were not in there. We have included the counselors, school leaders, and teachers. So you will be reading and seeing their rights and their responsibilities, consequences, etc., etc. Parents and community through newly constituted parent-teacher. We did not hear about just associations, but we heard about parent-teacher community. So it takes a community to raise a child. 1 minute, miss. And we looked at the roles for acceptable behavior by all members of school communities. All we are saying. And this is described in the proposed National Code of Conduct. So when you look at the regulations, you will see that there is a section that speaks of the National Code of Conduct in Schedule 8. Okay? Yes, Ms. Combi?
Madam Moderator, with regard to key roles in the provision of education, again, I go back to what I know about quality management, and it stresses the importance of having somebody responsible for monitoring and reviewing the student's experience. If we're talking quality education, that is a key role in any educational institution. There is somebody who is monitoring and reviewing the student's experience. Second point, I noticed it spoke about safe and secure. I'm not sure if where you're discussing that as far as environment, it's important we understand that those environments also have to be engaging. I don't know if that's captured, but teachers have to engage students. This is an exchange of information that has to take place. So if that word engagement is not there, I highly recommend that it be included.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I will go back and say that there are certain policies that will have to be developed to support the Act and the regulations. Okay, so in some policies, we will be able to capture a lot, but we cannot have everything inside of this Education Act. We are supporting it with the regulations, and there will be need for the ministry to have policies to continue to support the work that has to be done. Okay? Everything cannot be in a bill or an act. So we have to be sure that some of the issues that we raise, we are offering them, and we say thank you very much, but whether it can find a place in the act or the bill, the legal counsel is the person we go to. Okay?
Miss.
Not over there.
Sorry.
All right.
Yes.
You like to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I know that we're not going to change much by speaking here, but I think it's better to air your views than to stay quiet at home in your room and suffer. So I would like to start with a quote I read once that said, the finger that points to the moon, it is not the moon. It just shows you where the moon is. And that's what words are about. Words always point you to something, but it's not the actual thing. And the word that really captures me in that act is the word inclusion. Inclusion. We've been talking, but inclusion, I read this. I'm a teacher. I teach boys. So I always allow my boys to ask any question. Stupid. There's no such thing as stupid questions, but sometimes I tell them, that one a little stupid. I don't know if you're going to tell me that one a little stupid. So, inclusion. And I'm going to approach it from the philosophical point of view. And I just want to say, you right there, you sound very good. And I know our Saint Lucians are very intelligent. And we should be the ones not hiring people from all the way over there that knows nothing about our culture to come and write up our Education Act. And we're talking about Saint Lucians are educated, Saint Lucians are this, and Saint Lucians are that. And I'm talking to somebody on a screen miles away that don't know nothing about me, my background, anything, and they come in and put an Education Act that's going to build my society, my culture, and they don't know. So my first question, how would that...
Hold on, sir.
Yeah, let me just move forward.
I want to lay some ground rules here.
Okay.
Okay, respect. Respect is critical. Now, I think I must correct you. Okay? The persons you see on the screen did not just arrive here to do this work. Okay? You must be knowledgeable that there's a process through which the Ministry of Education goes through, so that when there is work to be done, and I will say, so when I get a job to do overseas, whether I am going to a white country or not, I must stand there and hear somebody say, where am I coming from because of the color of my skin? That is not progressive.
I did not make that statement.
Hold on a minute.
I did not say that.
Hold on a minute. You are saying, and you made the statement, and it is recorded, that the persons there, you are speaking to somebody on the screen who just came to write this document. That's not very hospitable. It's not very nice. It's not accurate
culture.
either.
Culture, I spoke about culture.
You're not speaking about, we have to be very careful. You just spoke about the word. I speak about the language, the choice of words that we use. And this is the second time I have to say that as St. Lucians, we do better than that, and we know better than that. We are not here to point fingers. We are not here to look at the color of people's skins. We are dealing with individuals who have years of experience, years as educators, have been working in the region for a long time, and I think, if anything, give me a little respect because I'm a Saint Lucian, and I have worked very, very closely with the team. It's not the way we want to go. So let's put on the right caps and let us do what is right, you know? The last time it happened, we had our consultants very traumatized. And I know this is not us as a people. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that. But I mentioned culture. I'm not the one to look at, I'm the one to look at the character, like Martin Luther King said, the character that makes the person. I was speaking about culture. Culture is very important in education. Education is basically the way you think, the way you believe, the way you act, and all of that is grounded in culture. So I'm sorry if I came across a little too aggressive, first of all, but I was talking about culture. So as we move on, the point I was making was towards inclusive education. I tend to think on the philosophy of inclusion a lot. And the Act said inclusive education means that education that values and upholds students of diverse backgrounds, abilities, and culture together in the least restrictive environment and supports the participation of all students in school life. So as I went down, I see a lot more about inclusion. The purpose of the Act talks about to provide an inclusive national curriculum that is responsive to students' needs and societal requirements. So one of the purposes of the Act is to basically implement inclusion. So when I go down to the section of inclusion, and they spoke about inclusion in 5 pages, they spoke about inclusion. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody can go and count it. They mentioned the word inclusion in those 5 pages about 40 times. In those 5 pages, the word inclusion was mentioned about 40 times. So I'm asking myself that question of inclusion. I'm asking myself, I'm about 32 years old. When was the last time that we had an education system that wasn't catering for all individuals? I don't remember that time. Probably it was a time, I know we have persons with special needs. We cater for special needs. I don't know if we don't cater for special needs. I know from my knowledge we cater for special needs. We cater for Rastafarians in the school. We cater for they're included in our society. I tend to see that when I grew up, now I grew up from a low socioeconomic background. I was included. I was not discriminated against. I felt welcomed. So that type of inclusion, what else are we including in our culture and in our society? And I'm going to ask one more question, because education is what shapes, and I could be wrong, I could be very ignorant, I could be wrong, but education is what shapes your culture, because education works on the mind and the psyche of your people. So if I can teach my people to think in that specific way, what's the repercussion for my society, let's say 20 years down the line? Because it takes 30 years to indoctrinate a society. So down the line, when I implement that, what kind of society do I have? Do I lose my identity as a Caribbean person? Am I selling half of my culture? And again, my question was always about culture, because I look at it from a cultural point of view. I'm from Dennery. We have a fishing culture. I love culture. I love my patois. I like culture. So I'm talking about how does this affect our culture? The ideology and the philosophy of inclusion. Does it affect our culture, or does it enhance our culture? And our culture is based on our belief in God, one God.
And I think from all perspectives, it is the positive inclusion of everyone. You said you didn't know at one point in time, I think I'm old enough to know, that we had children with special needs that parents hid away from us as people because we did not accept them at school. We did not want them around, and children were left at home. Now we are saying every child is entitled. Inclusion, spiritual inclusion, cultural inclusion is what we are speaking about in there. I do not know what other inclusion that you would think that the Education Act, the Attorney General's office would allow us, or the Ministry of Education would allow this Education Act and regulation to hold on. Yes, Betty.
Last comment from me. I'm going according to what the Act says, to enhance the delivery of high-quality education services and supports to enable students in Saint Lucia to reach their full potential as learners, to nurture holistic student achievement, to provide for equity, inclusion, and diversity among students, and so on. You know, everything I have shared here this evening, it is pertaining to requirements for a system that is focused on the student. Everything I've shared here. And if it's still considered as, do we put it or do we not consider it, I would like to, you, Ms. Moderator, and your group, I am assuming maybe you all have done it, but there is an international standard entitled Educational Organization, Management Systems for Educational Organization, Requirements with Guidance for Use. ISO 21001. Yes. Yes. So if you reference that document, ma'am, all the things I spoke about there should be included in a document that's aimed as quality education. This is my final comment.
Thank you very much. I am sure this is well noted, and I have no doubt Monica will go back along with our council and make sure that we remain on the right path. The other thing that we made sure that the education bill includes regulation to guide its implementation. And as I said earlier, ahead of time, that this is the first time in the history of Saint Lucia that we have regulations that support the Education Act. It supports the consistent interpretation and implementation of the Act. If you look to the very beginning, you will see in the 2005, there were not many interpretations, but we have increased, and every time we met, somebody was saying, you did not define this, you did not define that, you did not define. So this bill has several, even defines what a youth is. Okay, so take a little time and look. If you think before Friday that there is a term that has not been defined, please send it in. We will look and see if it is within another document, because the Act cannot encompass everything. We said there are others, the child law, there is education for all, we have the Constitution. There are several other documents that the Act should not be repeating everything that is in another document. But I am sure it will be referenced, okay? So we try to make sure that we took things and we dealt with it. Includes a detailed description of the national curriculum and the National Code of Conduct. We looked at that and we made sure that this is well defined there. We presented it. In fact, I presented the regulations and the Code of Conduct to all teachers at their conference, because we did not want anyone to believe that we were acting against their rights. The last slide that I would be looking at, it adds new programs, services, and support. The old 2005 did not have a national curriculum, which includes early childhood programming and enables numerous educational pathways. This is now encompassed there, and this includes attendance at specialized schools such as TVET, sports, etc. And you know, the ministry is moving in that direction. So the Education Act is reflecting this technical vocational trend, so that when we speak to alternative pathways, we are saying if a boy or a girl or a child is not comfortable with all the academics, there are alternative pathways to educating them. And we are saying that it includes the national qualification framework in there. So these are all new additions we heard, and as you heard Mr. Kodra said, he said 700, 1,000, but I am sure both Paula and Monica, as well as Miss Emmanuel, will tell you, we receive thousands of comments, and we are inviting everybody online, all those here face to face. If you have additional comments to make, please do not hesitate, but we cannot continue speaking and going through this for another year. This is the first time when I look at the research that an education enhancement, we were not writing, I want you to remember that, we were not writing a new education act or bill. We were not writing a bill. We were enhancing what was there, and it took 2 years. My people, I think as a Saint Lucian, I must say, we wait for last minute. We don't read sufficiently. We don't stand and give our opinions. Yes, sir.
Yes, on that note, Madam, Marcus Garvey said, if you want to hide anything from a black man, put it in a book. So it is true that a lot of us don't read enough. So I'll support you on that. Secondly, you said this is the first time this has been done, and I applaud the effort, because we within the Rastafari community, we've always acknowledged the fact that our education system was handed down to us by our former colonial powers. So it is very important for us to revise and enhance and ensure that we put things that are reflective of us as a people. So it's very important for our education system to reflect us first and foremost. So when I heard you say also that if we have comments and so on, send it in, we have the deadline is by Friday and so on. It begs the question, if this education enhancement consultation and so on, was there a time frame for which it had to be completed or concluded? Because I heard the good priest say that from January they sent a 16-page document, and if that was not included, how are we certain what we're going to say here today will be included for Friday?
Don't say that.
Well, that's what the priest said.
I am sure
and I'm
you
quoting
heard,
him.
No, I am sure you heard Paul, yeah, Dr. Williams.
She didn't address that.
Yes, but let me tell you something. Did you hear me say we started 2002? We in 2004, 2022.
Yeah,
we're in 2024 now.
Yeah, that's 2
and
years.
Still, we have people who are still saying, I have not seen, I have not heard.
So what does that mean? That means probably the consultants have not done enough.
Really?
Yes, probably that's what it means. Because if people are still saying that, I mean, something like an education act.
Did you hear the advertisements?
No, somebody sent me the link. That's why I get to know about it. That's why I asked in my first comments here, I asked whether the Rastafari community was engaged, because I heard the good priest say that the Catholic community was engaged, and they came up with a 16-page document. Yeah. So if the Rastafari community was engaged, probably would have had a document presented to you likewise.
To us. Okay,
because
then,
we have always lamented the fact that our education system lacks what we call black history, African history, giving our children a more appreciation of themselves as black people, because we are predominantly, 85–90% of our population is predominantly African descendants. And our education system needs to reflect that. And in so much so that Even in Saint Lucia, our Saint Lucian history, our freedom fighters, all these things are not even taught to our children in the school system. So it is very important that we include that aspect. And even the Prime Minister, when he got into office in July, in August, Emancipation Day, the 1st of August, he mentioned that the school system would now embrace more black history and bring that to bear and educate our children more on those things, because our children, basically, they're in an identity crisis. They don't know who they are. So this education system must reflect these kind of dynamics in it.
Let me say
I've not read it. Honestly speaking, I've not read it, and maybe you're going to set me on the right path. But I just wanted to bring out those points as well.
And we are very thankful. Thank you very much for that. This we lament over and over, that history and the kind of history. Now, let me just go back and say, when this act was first written, it was not written by anybody who didn't belong to Saint Lucia. It was written by a Saint Lucian. Okay? And the act, the 2005 act, had not been reviewed. It had not been reviewed. We hear you. When you read this, you will see that there's a section. The curriculum of the school can be guided. And we do appreciate, that's why we go, I hear about culture. Money is being pumped into La Waz, La Marguerite, for the school. We know that not everybody, not every school will have the same cultural activities, etc., etc. But we are saying now that this act or this bill empowers parents to be on the parent community association. So when you go to the school, you have a voice. The Ministry of Education that I know also entertains and listens to the voices of parents. But if you don't engage them, if you do not speak to them, and you in the way that they should be spoken with, I think we are all going to lose out. But I will also just say to all those who are online and all those who are sitting here, if you have not yet downloaded this third draft, please do so. If you have comments, the code of conduct is in the regulations. It's section 8 of the regulations. It's right in there. The National Code of Conduct, Schedule 8. Okay, so when you take the time, and I agree with my brother over there, St. Lucians, we are too reactive. We don't read, and then last minute, we all begin to make a fuss. Please let us know what is critical and important to us. I'm a lifelong educator, and I follow education. I work in other regions, writing policy, writing regulations and standards. So I will not shortchange my country. So let us be very careful. Read, make your notes, and please share. I would now like to invite, I think, the immediate needs. Mr. Kodra, was that you, or is that me to continue? That's for me. So what are our immediate needs for this education bill, regulation, and standards? Can we all see it? Okay. So we have a new Education Act, we have new regulations, we have a new National Code of Conduct, we have an expanded modern national curriculum. We want strong, safe, and secure schools. We have quality, inclusive education for all. Oh, okay.
She doesn't want to. She's actually basically removed herself.
Yes, there we are. I was saying that we have quality, inclusive education for all. So we have an expanded education service supports and programs, including early childhood education, special education, and secondary education. We have increased student learning, achievement, and well-being. When you read through, you will see that it's not only Cape students who we are saying this bill must cater for island scholars, and we have enhanced student preparation for success in the school, the workplace, tertiary education, and life, and we are looking at increasing student success. This is what the education, as Betty says, education, the most important stakeholder are the students and the teachers, okay? And we have consulted, regardless of what you may hear, we have gone out of our way to consult the teachers, the teachers, the teachers, the teachers. Yes, ma'am. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, the mic, yes.
Yes, there are children who are not very academic, and I would like to ask if the CARE school is part of this, because there are children who don't pass common entrance to get to the good secondary schools. I don't know if, I think at one point they couldn't get into school if they didn't get the marks. Now I think they have more inclusive where they get to go to a secondary school regardless of whether they pass or they didn't pass the common entrance exam.
Can I just briefly say to you that CARE is one of the institutions. They just need to rebrand themselves, okay?
It's a very good school.
Very good school where students are taught what is
Work
so very
ethic.
critical to understand. The first year is spent in what is called the Adolescent Development Program, the ADP, that teaches self-awareness along with maths, English, civics. It teaches them how to communicate, how to do interviews, so before they move into the 2 years of skills. They have the skills program, and if you are very keen to complete, you can complete that and get your CVQ level 1 within 18 months or more.
Well,
so CARE it has been consulted.
My question is, some of that initial program, is it being implemented in let's say in this or the regular secondary schools? Is it part of the curriculum?
To be able to implement the program that CARE is offering, you have to be specially trained at Savol in Trinidad. The government, I know a couple years ago, did send a number of teachers to be trained in what is called the junior ADP, because government sent some of the students who did not succeed at the common entrance and who wanted to go to CARE to get the build up, and some of them could return to the ordinary secondary school. But CARE is a program that a lot of people in Saint Lucia think is meant for the less capable or able. I have known St. Mary's College students to leave St. Mary's College and go to CARE to learn a skill, and is now a pilot, okay? So let us look at, when we speak about the alternative pathways to education, you will not find it all spelled out, ladies and gentlemen, in the bill. But the Ministry of Education, we have the PS, we have the CEO, and we have the DCEO, all of them are there, and policies and programs to enhance success of learners is their business, okay? Their business when they hear your voices. So feel free. Yes, miss? Okay? Yes.
I just wanted to know if there was any engagement with the private sector about the TVET and the certification so that they can start preparing when they do their job analysis and their evaluations to start incorporating that. SLASPA is now doing an exercise of job evaluation, and it would have been perfect if we had, I guess unless it has become a bill, then you're not able to act on it. But it would be good to start sensitizing the private sector so that they can start incorporating it in their job descriptions, etc.
Thank you very much. TVET is very much on the front burner of the Ministry of Education. As you will hear, 4 of the secondary schools are now being converted into TVET schools. We already have a secondary school converted into a sports academy and having good results. So we are hoping that when the Ministry of Education sets up the 4 schools, you cannot just set up, as you would know, everybody sitting here and those online, you cannot just set up a school and say it's a TVET school. There are specific, isn't that so? Specific things that must be done, and they must pass to show that they are meeting all the requirements, because those schools will require persons who are trained in what they call the CIBET, yes. So they would have to be trained, and the assessors will come in. We are hoping that a lot of things will happen in terms of our students being made work ready. So I will now call on Mr. Kodra, our Deputy Permanent Secretary, who, yes, there's a comment online,
done, no?
yes.
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Online, or we have Mr. George here? Online?
Am I clear? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. Matthew? Yes.
Okay, great.
Matthew.
Just wanted to make a contribution, and you more or less partially said it, that we've been disassociating, we keep saying technical subjects and academics. I don't know where this idea got crossed. We need to fix that, because what has happened is we borrowed that from the time when persons really wanted their children to be doctors or lawyers, etc. And all these other jobs appeared to be blue collar, and people did not have their children become a mechanic or electrician or something like that, because it seemed like it was more manual labor, and they couldn't boast about their child being just a skilled worker. Instead, they wanted them to have an academic background that led them to being a bit of a scholar. But I think we have messed up, because tomorrow, meaning anytime from today, we really need technical people. Because if we don't have engineering concepts and skills being taught at school, and all we have is people who are good at doing, say, accounting and bookkeeping and wanting to be secretaries and managers, what are they going to manage? If we have a disaster tomorrow, we already have a disaster in the tourism sector, where they're saying that they don't have the skilled personnel. And then in the building sector, the disasters already started as brain drain. They don't have the technical personnel to carry on. From there, we need to merge the two. We need persons who are technically oriented to also have a strong academic background to be able to comprehend certain types of theoretical concepts. And what has happened is that they keep saying, oh, practical. So if you're a mechanic, you learn from, in the past, you learn from another mechanic. But these mechanics, they were good at hands-on stuff, but they couldn't read a diagram, or they could not integrate deep thinking or any kind of design thinking methodology into the technical or practical application. So therefore, we have mechanics and builders and people who claim themselves to be builders who don't, if you ask them about the fundamental principle of a structure and how the structure is held together, they haven't got a clue. So we need to, I just want to be short, we need to reinfuse this mindset that if we have, let's say for instance, percentage-wise, if we had 30% engineer-minded persons and we had a disaster, we wouldn't have to stand there with our hands open asking for help from the outside world, because kids or people with an engineering mindset, they can see how to take the rubble, what appears like the rubble, and convert it back into something constructive. But if you're just an accountant, that's why people keep saying, I'm looking for a job. There's no reason in 2024 for any young person that can use a cellular phone and a computer to be searching for a job. It's ridiculous. It's one of the most ridiculous things out there, because why? Not like you have bills to pay. Your family's taking care of the bills. You should be able to do your learning and be able to achieve a certain skill level on the internet to be able to at least be able to generate revenue. Bar none, no matter what you're doing. That's what I need to say.
Mrs. Anthony.
Yes, Paula. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to respond. I'd like to respond to that comment and to thank Mr. Anderson for making it. I think one of the things that we have endeavored to do in response to significant representation from stakeholders actually enable better, or hopefully better enable technical and vocational education and training, different pathways for education that suit students well. And that's what we believe the Education Act should do. In the 2005 Act, it wasn't as open or explicit around enabling students to have different pathways through the education system. And that from the start, many people asked us to ensure that the Act enables people to have those pathways. So now with the revised bill, those in the Ministry of Education will have the support to introduce the programs that they're trying so hard to introduce to meet the needs of students and also the citizenship of Saint Lucia. So we're hoping that the Education Act will be empowering with the way that it is currently proposed. And Mrs. Anthony, I think that we would prefer that you continue on with the slides, and Mr. Coder will support you, but in the interest of time, we're starting to go over time. Perhaps if you could go through the balance of the slides.
More question, I'll take that question and then we'll go on. Thank you.
Mrs. Anthony and everyone here. In dealing with legislation, there has to be an underlying vision and strategy. Legislation comes out of strategy and out of policy. And that, I think, maybe is perhaps part of the challenge for some people to grasp some of the things that are perhaps included and why certain things are included and why certain things are not included. And I'm just going to throw one example. A decision to shift the age. So we shifted compulsory age downwards, I think to 3 years, but we haven't actually increased it upwards to say 18 years to encapsulate post-secondary education. Now that I think is perhaps an issue that would then be more encapsulated within what is the strategy, what is the policy. Should we be perhaps providing more contact time, especially for individuals at that particular age? So I'm just throwing it out there that as one matter that we need to perhaps encapsulate. But it is very important because you're hearing quite a lot of comments about curriculum. And I know quite often these pieces of legislation don't want to be prescriptive about curriculum, but we're prescriptive about so many other things. And some people want to know that there is some sort of basic minimum delivery that is coming from education, from the education system. So you then, and I think it's important even within the conversation about whether we're doing TVET or whether we're doing this, we talk about inclusivity, but then where is the inclusivity, let's say, in terms of issues of language, right? And this is an age-old matter about Creole and access. That's a major access issue, right? And it's not really encapsulated as far as I could see. I mean, I tried to read very quickly the latest version while being here, but that's not, I think that's maybe something that there's a gap that still needs to be dealt with respect to that. Because especially when we're having that conversation about these specialized schools, you have a specialized school for sport, all right? But what about that minimum that everybody's supposed to be able to receive going through that system if we're talking about that whole push towards inclusivity, right? So I think perhaps there should be some consideration regarding that issue of curriculum, that there should be some minimum, that people know that it's not just about the minister who's going to proclaim it through whatever it is, but and especially given the fact that you're bringing forward regulations, maybe there should be some things in that regulation that actually are more prescriptive when it comes to the issue of history or language or science education, because we're prescriptive about a lot of other things. So I think we should potentially consider that that should be included. I mean, there are a lot of things I can comment about the Act in terms of how it perhaps could be cleaned up and improved, but that would be obviously for a very long conversation. And I'll maybe, well, within the 3 days that we were suggesting that individuals have, I'll see what I can actually put forward. But I think it's just to make the point, though, that education is a very complex undertaking, and we should never think that we're always going to get it right in one iteration or 2 iterations or 10 iterations. But we should certainly try, and it comes back to the same point I think Mrs. Comey was making, that there has to be a continuous process of review. We quite often put it on the shelf, and then we'll wait another 15, 20 years before it's actually looked at. So it has to be continuously looked at. So maybe amendments may have to come next year to in fact improve on what we hope to pass already. Thank you.
Mrs. Anthony.
Changes would come within the regulations that are a lot easier to change. So, but we have heard, we are noting, and
excuse me, Mrs. Anthony.
Yes, Paula.
Sorry, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you so much for those comments. I'd just like to make a comment about the age and also about the curriculum. The age described in now is in the Act is the mandatory age for education. It is not the possible age for education. So your point about students being able to stay in school for an extended period of time is certainly available to them. The Act actually is silent as to how long they could stay, to leave it at the discretion of those involved with education. So what you're reading is the mandatory age, which has been expanded as you had correctly articulated. Secondly, with regard to the curriculum, the 2005 Education Act only describes what is, it says, it makes reference to a core curriculum, but does not describe it. In the regulations now, the core curriculum is described. There's a curriculum described for early childhood. There's a curriculum described for primary and a curriculum described for secondary. That has some of the elements that you referred to in your comments. So we have endeavored to meet those requirements that you are discussing, and really did as part of the regulations, and that's why we are so committed to the inclusion of the regulations. have that specificity in terms of what the Act enables. So I think I'll leave it there, Mrs. Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. And I would just like to repeat that, you know, this bill or the Act has to take into consideration or has taken into consideration other regulations, other acts, other bills that pertains to different sections of the country. And we are not repeating them in there, but we are very much aware of how far we could go and what can be done. So that's why we were able to make sure that we have the regulations to support the Act. So let us move on. Paula has said we have gone. It's simply because we started late. And gentlemen. So, this is yours, Mr. Kodra. Oh, she's asking me to do this. Okay, then, I shall move myself around to read the next steps. What are the next steps to this consultation? The consultation process with the Ministry of Education and stakeholder groups. We did research and we did data analysis. There were several drafts of bills and regulations created, circulated, and revised in response to stakeholders' input. Validation session is today, May the 21st, 2024, and the final drafting will take place. If you have any comments, make sure. The legislative process is not with the consultants. Okay, the legislative process, where the ministry receives the draft bill and regulations will be reviewed by the Office of the Attorney General. They have already been involved. The continued consultation and development of the legislation would take place. Consideration and approval would be done by Cabinet, Parliament, and the Senate. It is now up to the Ministry of Education to move on this matter. Whether we have a bill or we move this process forward lies with the minister and his ministry team. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will now call on Mr. Sipal. Mr. Sipal has left. You'll do, we have been having question and answers throughout, so we want the expression of thanks. Mr. Sipal had to run, will be done. You should have made the CEO do that. I'll put on the spot.
You want to change?
I think I'll call the Chief Education Officer to do the vote of thanks. Mr.
But before she goes, I just want to make mention of a few things.
Yes, do a few things.
Just one second. Colleagues, good evening again. I noticed there was very good discourse. I mean, I noted a few, the comments were wonderful. The discussion was good. And what I'm happy about is that there's still the opportunity to present your concerns. But I can tell you, many of the concerns that you expressed there, when these documents came up for our review, I can just tell you that the EQUIP project was actually due to end in March. But because we had not completed this consultancy, as well as that of special education, well, these are two of these. We did ask for an extension of this till October. But we definitely need to wrap up. And again, I mean, at the end of the day, many of our concerns or issues will arise. I mean, we're in a very dynamic era, and we have to be responsive. And what we try to guard against, well, at least from our end, if there are changes to be made, because I noticed some of them in the act, and we are questioning this. If we are to make changes, do we have to necessarily go through Parliament? Why can't this be put in maybe the power of the minister, or looking at a policy document? I can tell you, looking at alternative pathways to education, it is now included in the act. However, our education sector development plan, it is already included in there. That is why we had moved to the sports academy. We are moving to TVET education. Some of the concerns about the care model, what you would know about the TVET model is that it is based, and it is not for slow learners. It is not for persons who cannot be good at the academics. Let us remove that misconception. TVET is for everyone. And the model that we are designing TVET on, it has to be inclusive. The mechanics out there make more money than us. The plumbers make more money than us. We are moving away from this traditional type approach. So we are bringing these things on board using the care model where it molds students. We have trained persons using the Survival program who are currently in our education system. So these persons, we are going to move them into these schools and do further training for the teachers who are moving into the new TVET schools. So I just wanted to bring this on the table. And the last thing, with respect to the age, there was an amendment to the maximum age. Actually, compulsory age was from 5 to 15. We got recommendations, why not 18, why not 20? But in all of our discussions, looking at age of consent and all of these things, we moved it up till 16. So it is now from 3 to 16. But as was explained, it does not preclude anyone from being at school, because the chief education officer does have the autonomy. She does have the authority, to be able to have a child in school irrespective of that maximum age. So I just wanted to bring this. Colleagues, let me say thank you for this very informative session. We will continue to engage, but I will bring on board Mrs. Beverly Diodone, our Chief Education Officer, who will do the formal thank you. Ms. Diodone, I'm not sorry for marrying.
Thank you, Mr. Kodra. Good evening, everyone. Let me take this opportunity, stakeholders, to express my gratitude. You've heard Mrs. Anthony. It's been a long process. Many stakeholders have been engaged. The consultants and the rest of the team, they have considered all of the recommendations, the suggestions that have come from all of our stakeholders. And I want you to know today, colleagues, that your presence here, whether face-to-face or virtually, does tell us that you have the best interest of our education system at heart, the best interest of our students at heart. And we know that the consultants are paying close attention. I listened attentively to Mrs. Anthony as she moderated, and we heard the comments from our consultants. So we know, colleagues, that your voice matters, your voice is being heard, your comments, your suggestions, your recommendations will definitely be considered. We have, and I want His Grace to know that we consider the church, we consider the Rastafarian community, we consider our students, all of our stakeholders. And remember, colleagues, that our children are the most important stakeholders. So their voices matter. So we want to say thank you. I want to say, as Chief Education Officer of Saint Lucia, And I did say to Mr. Kodra, please indicate that we are moving in the direction of alternative pathways. We have our 4 schools being converted to or transformed to TVET institutions, and you will continue to hear a lot about the transformation of our 4 schools into TVET institutions in the upcoming days. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your input, and we look forward to continued collaboration as we finalize the bill. Thank you.
And let me just say, on behalf of my colleagues, Professor Williams and Mrs. McKinnon, we thank you ever so much for staying with us, and we are prepared to have you send in. Ms. Emmanuel, you want to come and give the website or wherever it is people can download those documents so that they can peruse it and send their comments. So I say to you, thank you on behalf of my colleagues and myself for taking time to remain with us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to just echo the sentiments of the DPS and our Chief Education Officer. This is very much an iterative process. Every comment, every concern received, we have taken it with, well, it has been very much well received. At no point have we thought less of anyone's contribution. We value, no matter how tough the criticism may be, we receive it very well because we understand the interest, we understand the motive is to ensure that we have a very quality education system and, of course, a very solid education bill and regulations. So we thank you very much for the passion. I was quite intrigued by that. I remain quite intrigued. And we hope over time that the final document will be ultimately to Saint Lucia's satisfaction. Should you have any further concerns, you can always email equipprojectslu@gmail.com. Let me just call it out. equipprojectslu@gmail.com. Of course, you may contact me 720-9636. Well, solely for this purpose. You may yes, you may call us solely for this purpose. I'm kidding. 720-9636. But you can, yes. You may reach me WhatsApp or telephone call, or you can email the project unit, equipprojectslu@gmail.com. All concerns are well received. And of course, we would like to say to you, sir, for the Rastafarian community, there was no intention to malign or to omit you. We did make substantive effort to engage all religions. And of course, we will continue to ensure that all stakeholders are rightfully engaged in this process. So thank you, everyone, and do have a good evening. Sorry? Oh, it is available on the various platforms, GOSL platforms, MOE platform, likewise Equip. We will recirculate should persons not have had access to these documents. But thank you so much. Oh, we do have water and beverages on this side.
Water and beverages on the other side. Get home safely. God bless everyone. Thank you.